December 17, 1944. Dawn breaks over Honsfeld, Belgium. SS Obersturmbannführer Joachim Peiper stands among a sea of olive-drab containers. Thousands of them. Jerry cans stacked 3 meters high, stretching 200 meters in every direction. 50,000 gallons of American gasoline. Just sitting there, abandoned. His men are celebrating. They think they've won the lottery. They're refueling their Tigers and Panthers, pouring American fuel into German tanks, laughing about German efficiency defeating American wastefulness. But Peiper isn't celebrating, because he's just realized something that makes his blood run cold. The Americans fled so quickly that fires still burn in oil drums. Coffee sits steaming in metal cups. They didn't even try to destroy this fuel. They left it behind like garbage. Here's what Peiper doesn't know yet. Within 6 hours, at a place called Stavelot, the Americans will deliberately set fire to 2 million gallons of their own fuel rather than let it fall into German hands. 2 million gallons. Burned on purpose, destroyed. That's enough fuel to power every tank in the entire German offensive, twice, and the Americans will burn it like it's nothing. By the end of this battle, the United States will destroy over 8 million gallons of its own gasoline. More than the entire fuel allocation Germany scraped together for the largest offensive of 1944. Think about that. America destroyed more fuel denying it to Germany than Germany had to fight with. But here's the truly shocking part. Those 8 million gallons represented just 3 days of normal American fuel consumption. 3 days. What took Germany months to accumulate, America used and threw away in 72 hours. This is the story of the moment Germany discovered they weren't fighting a war. They were fighting American industrial output. And that was a battle they'd already lost. This is the story of how the largest German offensive of World War II ran out of gas. 6 months before the Battle of the Bulge, Albert Speer delivered a report to Hitler that should have ended the war immediately. The numbers were simple and terrifying. In 1944, the United States produced 1.8 billion barrels of oil. Germany produced 33 million barrels, including synthetic fuel, including captured Romanian oil fields, including everything. Do the math. That's less than 2% of American production. But here's what makes it truly shocking. The East Texas oil field, just one oil field in one state, produced more petroleum than all of German-occupied Europe combined. One American oil field versus an entire empire, and it wasn't even America's largest oil field. California produced more. Oklahoma produced more. The Germans were trying to fight a mechanized war while America was literally swimming in oil. Want to know how desperate Germany's fuel situation was? By late 1944, the Gestapo, Hitler's secret police, were investigating the theft of individual liters of gasoline. Not gallons. Liters. Because that's how precious fuel had become. Meanwhile, American soldiers in Europe were washing their clothes in gasoline because it cleaned better than water, and they had so much they didn't know what else to do with it. German farmers were going back to horse-drawn plows because there was no fuel for tractors. American farmers were buying second tractors because fuel was so cheap. The Luftwaffe had grounded most of its aircraft for lack of aviation fuel. American pilots were complaining about having to fly extra training missions because bases had too much fuel stockpiled and needed to use it up. This is the context for the Battle of the Bulge. Germany's plan was to attack through the Ardennes forest, split the Allied armies, capture the port of Antwerp, and force a negotiated peace. The plan required 4.5 million gallons of fuel. Hitler allocated 5 million gallons, but only 2.5 million actually made it to the front lines due to Allied bombing of German supply routes. So the German High Command did something that reveals just how desperate they were. They planned to steal fuel from the Americans to complete their own offensive. Read that again. Germany's strategy for winning was to capture enemy supplies. They weren't planning to win. They were planning to scavenge. While Germany was planning to steal fuel, America was building pipelines. Pluto, pipeline under the ocean. Pumped fuel directly from England to France under the English Channel. Engineers laid pipes across the ocean floor. It delivered 1 million gallons per day. Per day. The Cherbourg-Paris pipeline delivered 800,000 gallons daily. The Seine line moved 650,000 gallons. By December 1944, this network of pipelines was delivering 8.2 million gallons every single day to Allied forces. But here's the shocking comparison. That daily delivery was more fuel than Germany had allocated for the entire month-long Battle of the Bulge. The Red Ball Express, a convoy system of 6,000 trucks, delivered 2,500 tons of supplies daily. Each truck burned 40 gallons per day just running supplies. The supply operation itself consumed more fuel than entire German army groups received. By December 1944, American forces in Europe were consuming 1.2 million gallons of fuel per day and receiving 1.4 million gallons. They were accumulating reserves while fighting a war. Captain James Rose of the U.S. 743rd Tank Battalion recorded in his diary on December 16th, the day the German offensive began, received fuel resupply 8,000 gallons. Third delivery this week. Storage tanks already at capacity. Told supply sergeant to stop sending fuel until we use some. Think about that. American tank units were telling supply officers to stop delivering fuel because they had too much. On the same day, 20 miles away, Joachim Peiper was being told he had enough fuel for 50 miles of combat. Maybe, if nothing went wrong. The American supply depot wasn't even a major facility. It was classified as a Class 3B depot, a temporary forward supply point. But what Peiper found there was staggering. Pyramids of jerry cans. Thousands of them, stacked 3 meters high, extending 200 meters. 50,000 gallons. Hauptsturmführer Hans Grühle later testified, the Americans had not even attempted to destroy them. There were fires burning in oil drums for warmth. Coffee was still hot in metal cups. They'd abandoned enough fuel to run a panzer division for a month. But it was what Sergeant Wilhelm Hoffmann found that changed everything. Hoffmann could read English. In the depot office, he found shipping manifests, documents that told an impossible story. This fuel had been refined in Texas, shipped to New York, transported across the Atlantic Ocean to Liverpool, ferried across the English Channel to Normandy, then trucked 400 miles through France and Belgium to this tiny forward depot. A journey of over 6,000 miles, completed in less than 6 weeks. I showed the papers to Obersturmbannführer Peiper, Hoffmann recalled years later. He read them twice, then crumpled them up without a word. His face went completely pale. We both understood what it meant. Germany couldn't move fuel 400 miles through its own territory. America had just moved it 6,000 miles, through a war zone, to a temporary depot, and then abandoned it. Private Ernst Carr found something even more disturbing. A stack of Stars and Stripes newspapers dated December 15th, 2 days old. The headline celebrated a new pipeline from Cherbourg to Verdun, capable of delivering 300,000 gallons per day, a single pipeline, moving more fuel daily than Kampfgruppe Peiper would use in the entire offensive. As his men refueled, pouring American gasoline into German tanks, Peiper walked among the jerry cans, counting, calculating, coming to a terrible realization. If the Americans could afford to abandon this much fuel, then Germany had already lost. Peiper pushed forward. By evening of December 17th, his spearhead reached Stavelot. Intelligence reported a major American fuel depot there. Over 2 million gallons, enough to guarantee reaching the Meuse. Maybe even Antwerp. This was the miracle they needed. But as Peiper's lead tanks approached, they saw something that would haunt German commanders for the rest of the war. A wall of flame. Rising 100 feet into the air, black smoke billowing 1,000 feet into the sky. Captain John Brewster of the 291st Engineer Combat Battalion had received one order: deny fuel to the enemy at all costs. The Stavelot depot contained 2,889,000 gallons stacked across 15 acres. At 16:30 hours, as German tanks approached, American engineers poured gasoline trails between the stacks. Technical Sergeant Paul Hinkle threw a white phosphorus grenade. The explosion was immediate and tremendous, he recalled. A wall of fire shot up maybe 100 feet. The heat was so intense we had to run back a quarter mile. Within minutes, the entire depot was burning. The fire burned for 3 days. Unterscharführer Werner described Piper's reaction. The Obersturmbannführer climbed onto his tank turret and just stared at the flames. For maybe 5 minutes he didn't move, didn't speak. Then he climbed down and said, "They can afford to burn 2 million gallons to deny them to us. What are we doing here? Think about what just happened." The Americans destroyed enough fuel to power the entire German offensive to Antwerp and back. Twice, on purpose, because it was better to burn it than let the Germans have it. But here's the truly shocking part. America considered those 2 million gallons acceptable losses. Colonel James Snyder, Chief Logistics Officer for First Army, recorded that same day. Fuel destroyed at Stavelot, 2,189,000 gallons. Fuel received today, 1,847,000 gallons. Fuel issued to units, 1,623,000 gallons. Net change to reserves, Potus 224,000 gallons. Read that again. The Americans burned 2.2 million gallons and still increased their fuel reserves. Across the Ardennes, American engineers were torching fuel depots rather than risk. Capture Trois Ponts, 1.1 million gallons burned. Spa, 2.5 million gallons. Destroyed Malmedy, 750,000 gallons. Torched multiple smaller depots, 3.5 million gallons. Destroyed in the first week of the offensive, Americans deliberately destroyed over 8 million gallons of their own fuel. Germany's entire offensive allocation was 5 million gallons. The Americans destroyed more trying to deny it to Germany than Germany had to fight with, and America considered it a reasonable trade. By December 19th, Piper's fuel crisis had become terminal. His Tigers consumed 2.5 gallons per mile in combat. Panthers burned 1.5 gallons per mile. In the difficult Ardennes terrain, narrow roads, steep hills, deep mud, consumption increased by 40%. Hauptmann Otto Dingler recorded the mathematics of defeat. By noon on December 18th, we had consumed 67,000 gallons since the offensive began. We had captured perhaps 55,000 gallons. We were operating at a deficit. Meanwhile, that same day, American C-47 transport planes flew 316 sorties delivering supplies to surrounded Bastogne, including 160,000 gallons of fuel. The Americans were flying more fuel to a surrounded garrison than Piper's entire Kampfgruppe possessed. On December 20th, Piper received the message that sealed his fate. Fuel convoy destroyed by Allied aircraft. No resupply possible. Continue with available resources. He called his commanders together. Sturmbannführer Werner Putschke calculated they had fuel for perhaps 20 kilometers. The Meuse was 30 kilometers away. According to testimony, Piper told his officers, "Gentlemen, we have discovered we are fighting an enemy who burns more fuel to deny it to us than we received for this entire operation. What we captured at Hansfeld, which seemed miraculous, was nothing to them." He paused, then added, "We cannot win." This realization was spreading through German ranks like poison. Colonel Friedrich von der Heide, captured December 23rd, told American interrogators something that shocked them. "Your soldiers throw away chocolate. My men haven't seen chocolate in 2 years. You burn millions of gallons of fuel. We measure by the liter. You complain about cold rations. We haven't had hot food in weeks. How can we fight such abundance?" General Hasso von Manteuffel later wrote, "When I learned Americans had destroyed 8 million gallons rather than risk our capturing it, I knew the offensive had failed before it began. They could afford to waste more than we could produce." By December 21st, Piper was trapped at L'Église. His tanks formed a defensive perimeter. not because they were damaged, not because crews were killed, because the fuel tanks were empty. The American forces surrounding him had a combined fuel allocation of 340,000 gallons for December 21st alone. Piper had perhaps 1,000 gallons total. Private First Class Richard McKinley of the 30th Infantry Division wrote home, "We've got Germans surrounded who ran out of gas. Can you believe it? Our captain jokes we probably use more fuel heating coffee than they have for their tanks." December 23rd brought clear weather. Allied aircraft flew 2,000 sorties in support of ground forces. P-47 Thunderbolts consumed 300 gallons per hour. B-26 Marauders burned 200 gallons per hour. American air operations that single day consumed more fuel than Germany had allocated for the entire Battle of the Bulge. That night, Piper made his final decision. He ordered his men to abandon their vehicles and escape on foot through American lines. Of 119 tanks and assault guns that began the offensive, 39 remained operational. Perfect machines, experienced crews, full ammunition loads, all immobilized by empty fuel tanks. Oberscharführer Heinz Goltz described what happened next. "We drained every last drop from all vehicles. Maybe 200 gallons total." The Obersturmbannführer personally placed demolition charges on his command tank. "We destroyed millions of Reichsmarks of equipment, not from combat, from empty fuel tanks." Of 5,000 elite Waffen-SS soldiers who began with Kampfgruppe Piper, approximately 770 made it back to German lines. They had advanced 60 miles, captured several depots, killed hundreds of American soldiers, and discovered that Germany had already lost the war. News of what Piper discovered spread through German command like wildfire. On December 26th, Field Marshal Walter Model received the full report on captured and destroyed American supplies. His chief of staff recorded his reaction. The Field Marshal read the document twice without speaking. Then he looked up and said, 50,000 gallons captured at Honsfeld, 2 million burned at Stavelot, 8 million destroyed rather than let us take it. We are not fighting the same war." When Hitler was informed on December 28th, he refused to accept it. Albert Speer later wrote, "Hitler insisted the numbers were Allied propaganda. I showed him photographs of Stavelot burning. He claimed they were Hollywood special effects. He could not accept that America possessed such abundance. But German soldiers who'd seen it with their own eyes knew the truth." Grenadier Wilhelm Hoffmann wrote to his wife, "The Americans destroy more fuel in a day than we receive in a month. They drive tanks like we ride bicycles. They fly planes like we walk. This war is lost. We are just waiting to die." Feldwebel Ernst Müller wrote, "I watched Americans use gasoline to wash clothes, to heat water for showers, to burn trash. They waste more than we possess. We cannot fight infinity." The psychological impact was devastating. How could German propaganda about the weak, decadent Americans be true when those same Americans could casually destroy enough fuel to run the entire Wehrmacht for months? German prisoners captured during the Battle of the Bulge were often more shocked by American waste than by American firepower. Obergefreiter Ernst Reichhelm told interrogators, "We knew your production numbers. We saw the statistics. But seeing your soldiers throw away half-eaten chocolate bars, or pour out coffee because it got cold, or use gasoline to start campfires, that made it real. Every German who saw how casually you wasted what we would die for knew the war was already over." The final statistics of the Battle of the Bulge tell a story of mathematical impossibility. German fuel allocation. For the entire offensive, 5 million gallons fuel actually delivered to German forces. 2.5 million gallons fuel captured from Americans. 550,000 gallons, including Honsfeld fuel, deliberately destroyed by Americans. 8 million gallons American fuel consumed during the same period. 267 million gallons, think about those numbers. America used 100 times more fuel than Germany, and destroyed more fuel denying it to Germany than Germany had to fight with. Piper's Miraculous capture of 50,000 gallons at Hunsfeld represented 0.6% of American daily fuel consumption, less than what a single American armored division used in 2 days, less than the Red Ball Express burned in 3 hours of normal operations. It was a rounding error. During the Nuremberg trials, German military leaders were asked what made the difference in the war. Their answers were remarkably consistent. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel testified, "We had operational and tactical superiority from 1940 to 1941. By 1944, we couldn't move forces for lack of fuel while Americans moved entire armies like chess pieces. We were fighting World War I. They were fighting World War II. General Heinz Guderian wrote in his memoirs, "The moment Joachim Peiper captured 50,000 gallons at Hunsfeld and considered it miraculous, while the Americans considered it acceptable to abandon, the war was already over. We just didn't know it yet." Joachim Peiper himself, on trial for the Malmedy massacre, offered this testimony. "Every decision after December 17th was dictated by fuel shortage. We couldn't maneuver, couldn't pursue, couldn't retreat effectively. The Americans moved freely while we counted leaders. You ask why we shot prisoners? We literally couldn't spare fuel to transport them. That's the kind of war we were fighting." Today, you can visit the Laglis Museum in Belgium. Peiper's King Tiger tank sits there, positioned exactly where it ran out of fuel on December 23, 1944. The fuel gauge still reads empty. In 1984, 40 years after the battle, veterans from both sides gathered at the museum. Former Unterscharführer Karl Wortmann stood beside the massive tank with former Staff Sergeant Roy Anderson of the U.S. 30th Infantry Division. They'd been trying to kill each other in December 1944. Now they were old men, remembering. "We always wondered why you stopped here," Anderson said quietly. "We thought you were setting up a defensive position. We thought it was tactical." Wortmann laughed, but there was no humor in it. "We stopped because the tanks were empty. Just empty. You burned 2 million gallons at Stavelot to keep it from us. How could we fight that?" Anderson was silent for a long moment. Then he said something that captured the entire truth of December 1944. "We never knew you were that short on fuel. We had so much we never even thought about it. When they told us to destroy depots rather than let them be captured, we just assumed you had plenty too. We didn't know we were destroying your last hope." That conversation reveals the fundamental asymmetry of the Battle of the Bulge. One side measured fuel by the gallon and fought for every drop. The other side measured by millions and burned oceans rather than risk tactical inconvenience. One side sent their best soldiers to die capturing 50,000 gallons. The other side had so much fuel they told supply sergeants to stop delivering it because storage tanks were full. The outcome was never in doubt. The lesson of Joachim Peiper and the 50,000 gallons extends far beyond World War II. It reveals the nature of industrial warfare. Production defeats tactics. Logistics trumps courage. Abundance overwhelms dedication. The German soldier of 1944 was arguably better trained than his American counterpart, more experienced, more ideologically committed. It didn't matter, because behind every American soldier stood an industrial machine that could waste more resources than Germany could produce. American factories built a new aircraft every 5 minutes, a new tank every 7 minutes, a new ship every day. Oil refineries produced so much gasoline that companies experimented with new petroleum. Byproducts simply because they had excess crude to process. Germany scraped for every liter while America swam in oceans. This truth is encoded in every detail of Peiper's offensive. In the shipping manifests showing fuel transported 6,000 miles. In the pipelines pumping 1 million gallons daily under the English Channel. In the casual decision to burn 2.2 million gallons rather than let it be captured. In the pilot training that continued even while combat raged because America had fuel to spare. Major General J. Lawton Collins, who commanded American forces during the battle, later wrote, The Germans' desperate attempts to capture our fuel supplies revealed their fundamental miscalculation. They assumed we valued petroleum as they did, as irreplaceable. They couldn't comprehend that we had so much we could burn millions of gallons rather than accept even a minor tactical disadvantage. Joachim Peiper survived the war. He was imprisoned until 1956 for war crimes at Malmedy. He lived quietly in France until July 14, 1976, when he was murdered at his home by unknown assailants, likely revenge for his wartime actions. But in 1967, he gave an interview to historian Henry Moll. His words haunt. Finding that depot at Hansfeld was the worst thing that happened to me in the war. If we'd simply run out of fuel earlier, we might have retreated with our dignity intact. Instead, we advanced just far enough to discover the truth, to capture 50,000 gallons and think we'd won the lottery, only to learn that America had so much they considered it garbage, to discover that Americans had oceans while we had drops, to discover impossibility. He paused, then added, "We discovered we weren't fighting a war. We were fighting American industrial production, and that was a battle we'd lost before we even began." The Tiger tank in the Belgian Museum stands as a monument, not to German tactical skill or engineering excellence, but to the moment when courage met mathematics and lost. Visitors still ask the obvious question, why were such powerful tanks abandoned? The answer is simple and terrible. No fuel. By December 1944, the United States produced 67% of the world's petroleum. Germany, including all synthetic production and captured fields, produced less than 2%. The Battle of the Bulge failed not because of tactics or bravery. It failed because you cannot win a mechanized war without fuel, and America had all the fuel.